Well, hi everybody, and welcome back to the second Bringing Down the House Industry panel. I'd also like to welcome all of our remote locations over Skype in Boston, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Las Vegas, New Orleans, and Orlando. We're going to be talking about the songwriting process, production, recording, and how to get represented and how to protect your music. Well, guys, thank you so much for being with us. I'd like to start with just asking about your high school days. Were any of you musicians while you were at high school? Larry, you were playing at high school.
Yeah, my mother taught piano, so there was always a piano around the house, and she couldn't teach me anything I wouldn't let her, but at least I knew how to fool around and knew where the keys were and had a semblance of an idea of chord structure and stuff. And a bunch of guys in my high school started a rock and roll band, but the trouble was they didn't know how to sing and play at the same time. So I found that out right away. They were doing a bunch of instrumentals, and I joined the band as the singer until they could learn. And in that course, I learned how to play guitar from the guitarists and then transpose that onto piano. So when the time came, I brought the keyboards into the band and not totally, but pretty much by ear and by crook. But you know, at that early point in rock and roll, you didn't really have to be any good. So it didn't really matter. As long as you had gear and you could show up on time, you were pretty much a rock and roll band. That's all that was required.
I was in a band just because I had a van. Bingo. Result, huh?
We hired a guy as a bass player because his dad was a doctor and had enough money to actually buy him a bass rig, and no one else had the money to go buy one. He became the bass player as a result.
And how did the transition happen between going from musician, finding yourself in the business end?
Like I said, I can play guitar and keyboards well enough that if you don't play guitar and keyboards, I can fool you into thinking that I can. If, however, you have any semblance of musicianship whatsoever, you'll know in a second I don't have any idea what I'm doing. And that worked really well for me because I got through college. I actually worked my way through college playing in bars at night at the time when you could and actually make enough money to live on. At the time, my band was making, 100, 150 a night, and that was enough to live on. Sadly, today bands are still making 100 or 150 a night in bars, and you can't live on it. And I don't know what the hell you guys are going to do about that. I went to see Yes perform, and it became obvious that I was never going to be as good a keyboard player as Rick Wakeman, and I was never going to be in a band with musicians as good as Yes. So that's when I decided I got to do something else. And the natural progression for me was to be tour manager because I was the only one in the band at the time who wasn't too high or too drunk to get anything done. So I was the de facto tour manager, booking agent for the band I was in anyway, so I became a tour manager for other bands, moved out to LA, became a tour manager here. I was an in-house tour manager for Warner Brothers Records, I was in the right place at the right time. I wasn't the most qualified guy, but I was the guy who knew somebody. And from that, I got a real job at Warner Brothers doing touring, doing all the Warner Brothers tours and working with artists on tour, and particularly with young bands and trying to mold them into being something that worked on stage when they may not have had that kind of experience. I did that for 20 years until people quit buying records.
But Larry, you've been around a while in this business. There were some stories coming out backstage that I can't repeat, but I urge everybody to sit Larry down and give him a couple of drinks. But Larry, what changes have you seen happen through the business in your time in it?
Funnily enough, my niche in the business hasn't changed at all. The major changes have come in the recorded music aspect of the fact that nobody's buying recorded music the way it was. But fortunately, I was always on the periphery of that. I've always been in live performance and touring, not only playing in bands for 10 years and tour manager for 5 years, but the 20 years I spent at Warner Records, all I did was touring. I had nothing to do with the record aspect. At the time, recorded sales were so lucrative that Warner's could afford to have an entire staff of people who just went out with bands, particularly young bands, and worked with them and showed them what to do and made sure they didn't alienate their audience or the radio programmers, which was mainly English bands. And show them how it works in America and how it really works in the real world. Maybe they were very successful in their hometown, but whatever works in Boston may not work in San Francisco, and that's the kind of thing we do. So I've always been, you know what, you really shouldn't wear that. You know what, you should move the amp over here and put that kind of thing. Try to improve all the staging. So from that aspect, particularly even in songwriting, nothing has really changed in 40 or 50 years. The song structures, the harmonies, the hair and the dress and the staging and the instrumentation. I mean, how many guitar players out there are playing a variation of a Stratocaster and a Twin? How many singers out there are actually using SM57s and 58s? You know, it's like, it's the same stuff. So nothing that I'm involved with has changed very much. And that's working well for me, as you might expect. I really haven't had to reinvent myself. If anything, I've just accumulated a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience in that area about staging and live performance that I'm now sharing with the world, or, you know, working with younger acts saying, okay, this is what works and this is what doesn't work. What do you think, type of thing? And it's working for me.
No, do you find yourself in your roles pushing artists towards inspiration and just say you might want to go and look at this or take this approach?
Yeah, although my experience is you really can't push toward inspiration. You can only be ready for it when it happens to fly by. A lot of my musical talk is peppered with quotes. As a matter of fact, I have a Twitter feed, Larry from Ohio. 365 quotes every day is a different quote from a different artist about songwriting and about that I've gathered over the years. Sting says, I don't know what people do with their failures and their emotional problems that don't have songs to get them out. Where do they put them? And that's what you're talking about. You take that emotion, you lay it out in a song, and it's cathartic, and it's gone. Tom Waits says, inspiration is like nature photography. You get ready, you know how to take a picture, you've got the camera, the batteries are charged, you go out into the field behind a blind or whatever, and you wait. And you wait for 3 days. And suddenly, that bird of inspiration flies out of a bush and swings by you, and you got to be ready to pick up your camera and capture that moment, because in a second, that bird is not going to stop and say, here I am, and flutter for you. It's gone, and you're going to miss it, and there was the opportunity. And that's what inspiration's about. However, as I mentioned, you need to be ready. You need to have your craft ready. You need to have your head together. You need to be waiting, and you need to know it when it comes. It's like, whoa, that was cool. I got to do something with that. And don't say, oh, you know, I'll write that down later, or I'm not going to get up out of bed and write that down or anything. That's foolish. Anytime you get that little spark, and you'll know it when you get it, and when you do get it and you actually do something about it, it feels so good. And you can't wait for it to happen again, and yet you can't make it happen again. You only have to wait. And it will happen, and it's very cool when it happens.
That's a great analogy. I don't know if anyone saw that picture of a weasel on the back of a woodpecker this week. If I could have put that as a slide, it would have been perfect for you.
I need visuals, it's true.
Yeah. Okay, what we're going to do now is go over to some of our remote locations. Okay, let's go somewhere that has a population of 2.3 million and over 11,000 restaurants. Houston, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on? What's your question?
Hi, I'm Asia, and I'm in the singing group, the Isaac Sisters. And my question is, do you think that a young artist should write their own songs or allow someone more experienced to?
Rihanna is a fantastically successful artist,
yes.
But this young lady was asking about, should she be writing her own songs?
Yes,
And
only because I'm a songwriter, so.
So what's your view of people who are effectively doing other people's songs? You don't need to use Rihanna as the example.
No, I won't. Johnny Cash says, after I've written a song and performed it, someone else may pick it up and record it, and it doesn't sound anything like me. And initially, I hate it. And then I have to accept the fact that they heard a different song than I heard. So that's one aspect. Again, I'm just going from my quotes, while I'm thinking of what the heck I'm going to tell you about this. As a songwriter, I believe that initially you need to try to do it yourself. You take all your influences and all the things you've listened to and you've copied and you've mimicked, and you don't get too close, but it needs to be a lot of those influences. And then here's the mystery part. You have to make something that's your own. There's two ways of going about this. One is obviously just taking that verse from here and that chorus from there and that little turnaround from there, and that's playing it safe. And then you're going to end up with safe music, and it's going to be something your mom's going to like. And that, you know, what you need to do from those influences, and this is your goal, is to take that stuff and take it one step out. Break out of your comfort zone, as Robin was saying. Take it one step away from what you know, what your influences did, and that is where you want to go, and that's your goal, and that's where your audience is going to go. Because as an audience, you get bored to tears with stuff that's safe. You want to have something that's a little different, and yet it needs to be something that the audience can reach out and grab. You only have to stay one step ahead of your audience, not two. Because if you're 2 steps ahead of your audience, then your audience is going to go, what the hell is that? And then nothing's going to happen, and then you're stuck because you're 2 steps ahead and you can't come back, and then you spend a whole life being frustrated and bitter and angry and alone in a room when you're old with a drug habit. So don't do that. This is my advice. Don't go too far. Just go far enough out of that comfort zone of your influences, and then you kind of eliminate the infringement problem.
Let's go to a place commonly known as O-Town, and in a horrendous display of bad English, it's also called the City Beautiful. Who came up with that? I have no idea. It's Orlando, and we have Ricardo.
Hello, I'm Ricardo Rodriguez with the Charter Music, and my question was, how does one handle bad reception to a song released to the public without getting discouraged?
Take some solace in this. My experience is the people who hate your music aren't musicians. They wouldn't know how to write a song. They wouldn't know a good song if it bit them in the ass. So it doesn't really matter, and you have to let that go. If they were actual musicians and songwriters, they would say things like, hey man, your bridge sucks because you didn't go to the F minor 7th, and that's what you know, okay, that's constructive criticism. But just to say, oh man, I hate your song, you know, ignore that crowd.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much to our wonderful panel. Thank you to our studios, Skype, Live Nation, House of Blues, and Bringing Down the House. I've been Johnny Hines, and we'll see you next week.